WFYI podcast brought to you by Bloomington, Indiana, an American college town offering food and drink, college sports, outdoor activities, live music, cool art, and good times daily. Everyone is welcome in Bloomington. More information at visitbloomington.com.
This is WFYI News Now. It's April 22nd, and I'm Abriana Herron. On today's show, a lawsuit claims an IPS teacher allowed and encouraged the abuse of a 7-year-old second grader with disabilities. What Governor Holcomb was focused on in his first official visits to Brazil and Mexico. And a feature story on Indianapolis pianist Joshua Thompson, who has built a career around advocating for classical composers and musicians of African descent.
I loved all the music that I was playing, but I would sit back and be like, wait a minute, there's a lot of Black people on the planet. How is it that I have not seen or heard or performed any of their works?
Those stories coming up. But first, Indianapolis City County Councilor Luh-KEY-sha Jackson is Indiana's newest state senator. A Democratic precinct caucus chose Jackson last week to serve out the last few months of Gene Bro's term after Bro died last month. Jackson is the CEO of a nonprofit community center. She says she looks forward to tackling issues at the State House that she's worked on at the city level.
Working on either around transportation, housing, food access or disparities.
Bro's mother supported Jackson in the precinct caucus election, and the new state senator says she'll work to continue Bro's legacy.
She laid the foundation, I think, helping marginalized people, believing in champion for DEI, carrying the torch, fighting a good fight for the people as a whole.
Bro's name remains on this year's primary ballot. There will be another caucus after the primary to choose a replacement for Bro on the general election ballot. Jackson plans to seek that role too. And an Indianapolis Public Schools teacher allowed and encouraged the abuse of a 7-year-old second grader with disabilities in his classroom at George Washington Carver Montessori School 87, according to a lawsuit filed against the district. As WFYI's Lee Gaines reports, the teacher filmed another student beating up the child.
In the video, teacher Julius Jonikin can be heard encouraging the student to keep beating up the boy, who is sobbing while being hit repeatedly. An investigation by the Department of Child Services found that Jonikin jeopardized the student's well-being. IPS claims that staff responded to the incident immediately, but an attorney for the boy's family, Catherine Michael, says school staff knew about the abuse about a month earlier and failed to report it to DCS.
Did IPS act, immediately? I think it's pretty clear that that's not what happened.
Jonikin resigned from the district. Indianapolis police are now investigating the incident. I'm Lee Gaines.
Governor Eric Holcomb says his latest economic development trip underscores the importance of such trade missions, even as his time as governor winds down. Holcomb's first official visits to Brazil and Mexico were focused on agriculture and ag biosciences. He called Indiana's partnership with each of those countries agricultural powerhouses and says he discussed issues like supply chain resilience.
The world's depending on us and for food and fuel.
With less than 9 months left in his term, Holcomb says other countries' officials want to be assured Indiana's trajectory will continue.
They are heartened that I'm still on the road pitching Indiana Ag.
Holcomb says he plans to continue traveling before his time as governor is finished. And for our final story today, in recent years, American orchestras and classical musical ensembles have faced criticism for their lack of diversity. A 2023 study published by the League of American Orchestras found that Black musicians made up only 2.4% of orchestra musicians nationwide. Indianapolis pianist Joshua Thompson has built a career around advocating for classical composers and musicians of African descent. Thompson's concert with the Indianapolis Chamber Orchestra over the weekend highlighted the work of Black composers and performers. WFYI's Kyle Long has more.
As a child, studying classical music at the piano, Joshua Thompson wondered why he wasn't performing works from composers who looked like him.
I've been playing since I was 5. And at certain points in my life, whether it be 10 years old, 15, or 21, I loved all the music that I was playing, but I would sit back and be like, wait a minute, there's a lot of Black people on the planet. How is it that I have not seen or heard or performed any of their works?
This April, Thompson will take the stage for the biggest concert of his career, a collaboration with the Indianapolis Chamber Orchestra titled Black Keys, the evolution of the Black classical arts. In addition to performing, Thompson curated the program.
So the program that I'm doing is amassing an entire program exclusively of composers of African descent. It is essentially my take of an origin story discussing the creation, development, and evolution of the Black aesthetic. And so I always like to tackle as many senses as possible. And so you've got the world-class ICO orchestra members, vocalist Siren Simone, Kenyete Dance Company, which is an African dance company here in Indianapolis. I've wanted to work with them literally for about 10 years, and I finally get to on this one, so I'm excited. And then with Joshua Thompson, saxophonist of Premium Blend, on a couple other features, narrated by poet and writer Devin Ginn.
Joshua Thompson's collaboration with the Indianapolis Chamber Orchestra extends beyond the Black Keys concert. In 2022, Thompson was named Creative Partner in Residence for the ICO as part of the League of American Orchestras Catalyst Fund Incubator Grant, a program designed to promote inclusivity in classical music. ICO director Dana Stone said Thompson was an ideal partner for the orchestra.
Over the past 5 years, ICO really has been thinking a lot about the music that we perform, the artists that we engage, and how we work within our community. Joshua being hired was a major kind of turning point for this process. When we were awarded this grant, his name came to mind based on past collaborations with him, that he would just be a perfect asset for really helping us think creatively about ways to engage within our community, to reflect musically the goals of the organization. And here we are, 2 years into this grant, and things are really, really rolling and really exciting.
Stone told me that the ICO's audience has been supportive of the orchestra's work to diversify its programming. But Thompson is aware this is all happening amidst a growing backlash against diversity, equity, and inclusion programs.
We're looking at now, locally and nationally, the drum for DEI is not being beat nearly as much. We're even looking at legislation nationally where DEI is being taken out of, schools and whatnot. The reality is we're going to call it something different in another, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. But the work behind it is still pretty much the same. At the end of the day, I'm going to do this anyway. Because what we're doing is making the story of classical music much more comprehensive, much more accurate, which makes it way more compelling and applicable to the realities of the world in which we live in.
For WFYI, I'm Kyle Long.
That's all for today's episode of WFYI News Now. Our podcast is produced by the following people who live in your community: Drew Dodlin, Kendall Antron, who composed the music for this podcast, and me, Abriana Herron. Our news director is Sarah Neal Estes. If you like today's episode, remember to subscribe and share, and follow WFYI on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube to check in on our newsroom throughout the day. Thanks for listening. We'll be back tomorrow.